Alright, here we go. So I'm playing some Ishizu tier limits, and this has to be one of the best hands you can play with tier limits. Now I'll explain why. For one, we got Medora. This has to be the best starter in the deck if you're playing Gravekeeper's Trap, um, as well as having Keldo. Keldo is good, but it's not as good as Medora when you're playing that Gravekeeper's Trap. We also got Rainbow Bridge of Salvation in our hand, and I know some people are probably thinking that's not good in your hand, you want it in the graveyard. It's good in your hand if you got Medora plus another Shizu card, and I'll show you. Tier limit Scryme. On my opponent's turn, this will be an Omni Negate, and then I do have Rhino Heart here, which is the best normal summon in the deck. Now watch how all of this works out, right? So we're going to start off with Medora, sending the Keldo. So basically just any other Ishizu card, you send it. My opponent is going to chain Maxi. This will summon out the Medora right here, setting the Gravekeeper's Trap face up on the field. Since it's face up on the field, which is why I say Medora is the best, it's face up on the field, meaning we can go ahead and activate its effect. We're going to activate its effect to send the Rainbow Bridge of Salvation, then immediately activate the Rainbow Bridge of Salvation to grab the Tortoise plus the field spell plus a Gito. There we go. So then we're going to activate the Perloreno right here. Perloreno is going to grab Sheeran. Then we're going to activate the Sheeran to pitch the Agito. Then we're going to chain block this with Suliak because that's what we milled. But up until that point, look how much stuff we've done that can be repeated over and over and over. We started with 5 cards, and then we ended up having 5 cards before activating Sheeran right there. This will grab us a Havness, and then we mill. We hit a Rhino Heart plus a Sheeran. My opponent is going to activate Keldo to send those cards back. Now, if I was the opponent, what I would do, honestly, is send back some more cards that are kind of like dead cards, or cards that you don't want to see me mill again. I would honestly have targeted one of my other shufflers. I don't know why he only targeted just 2 cards, but I would have targeted another shuffler as well. He only targeted 2 of my cards though. That would have forced me to activate that other shuffler. So then I go into Abyss Dweller, so then that way he doesn't get any more effects. Activated Abyss Dweller, and then I go Rhino Heart. Rhino Heart is going to send Merly, and then I'm going to Fusion Summon into Kid Kalos right here. Activate Kid Kalos to grab that Merly, and then activate Kid Kalos again to special summon out Merly, and then that'll allow me to mill 8 more cards. Now look how many cards my opponent has in his hand right here, and I'm just still popping off. Now I ended up hitting Rainbow Bridge of Salvation right here and a different type of shuffler, so I got a Medora right there. So I go Shadal Beast and Kelbeck to mill more, and since Exchange of Spirits in my graveyard I can set a trap, so I set Suliak right here, activate Havness, and then I go into Rule Kalos, special summon negate. Then these 2 I'm going to go into Sprite Elf. Now it is important that you know why I did this. Instead of putting Rule Kalos here, the reason why I wanted to leave this space blank, and believe me, I could have put Rule Kalos here. I could have moved this card over if I wanted to. All I would have had to do is literally pop my Rule Kalos with Perloreno and then move it over. So I didn't misplay right here. I just want to point that out because the card that I am going to put here is very important. So I go ahead and shuffle some cards back, and then I activate Sprite Elf right here, and then bring out Cyber-Stein. Activate Cyber-Stein. That's going to bring out Naturia Exterio. Super busted card. So let's look at what we have here real quick, and then we'll start with the graveyard like we always do. I got a Keldo shuffler. I also have a Medora shuffler. Exchange of Spirits, so Gravekeeper's Trap prevents him from being able to special summon or use any cards in his graveyard whatsoever. It's completely locked out. We also got the Abyss Dweller to lock him out. We have Diviner right here in our graveyard, so we can revive Diviner, start milling more by sending Kelbeck or Agito to mill 5. Well, in the case of Elgato, it would send 10 cards from whichever side of the deck that I want, and 5 from the other one. We also have Merly, which I can revive to mill 3. And aside from that, if my field spell was to get popped, I can shuffle it back. And since I have Rainbow Bridge of Salvation, I would just need to shuffle back the Tortoise, the field spell, and I'd be able to activate another Rainbow Bridge of Salvation to get this card back into my hand all over again. Then as far as field and hand goes, in my hand we got Elgato and Havness. Now I could activate Gravekeeper's Trap, send the Elgato to mill 5, and then replace Elgato with Havness, or not Havness, with Kelbeck, and then when my opponent when they start milling, I can send a card back into their hand. So I could do that by activating Gravekeeper's Trap. Now, typically I would want to wait until they put a monster on the field to do that, so then that way the Kelbeck would activate in my hand, enable me to send that card back to their hand when they burn their normal summon. So yeah, so as far as Havness goes, this one can summon itself onto the field and mill 3 cards when my opponent activates an effect. We also have Crime, which is an Omni negate. Suliak is a monster negate. Both of these cards can start plays for me. This one can start plays from the field. This one, or from the hand. This one can start plays from the field. So if I put a Havness onto the field and then activate Suliak, it'll send that Havness from the field to the grave, and then I'll be able to do a fusion summon. If I activate Crime, I could send it from my hand to the grave and do a fusion summon. Or I could even send Elgato to start milling off of the negate from Crime. So both of these 2 traps, very powerful. This trap extremely powerful, especially going against tier limits, because he can't activate anything in his graveyard. I can pop anything on the field using the Pearl Areno. All I have to do is just shuffle back a tier limit monster and I'll be able to pop something. Abyss Dweller, of course, turns off my opponent's graveyard. This card's effect is already resolved. It was just simply to get out Naturia Exterio. Naturia Exterio basically means that my opponent cannot activate any spell or trap cards. If they do, I can basically negate them by banishing 1 card from my grave and sending 1 from my deck to the grave. Now, this will create a form of advantage for me while negating simultaneously, because when it sends a card from the deck to the grave, I can then activate. So I'm activating fusion summons, I'm getting cards in the graveyard that I will want to see in my graveyard, I'm getting effects, I'm getting advantage from negating their spells and traps. That's the important thing about Naturia Exterio. And I can pretty much just banish cards that are kind of worthless to me that are in the graveyard, like Triple Tactics Talent, the Maxis that I have in the graveyard. I could burn through the Rainbow Bridge of Salvation if I really don't need it. The Shadal Beast if I really don't need it. Like, I'll consistently get a bunch of trash cards in there that I can keep using to negate. Then we got Special Summon Negate with the Rule Colossus. And yeah, that's the board. So my opponent has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 cards in hand and 21 left in his deck, 9 in the graveyard, and 1 in his banish pile. Let's see how he tries to play through this. So the first thing I'm going to do is activate that Gravekeeper's Trap and say GG easy, because this will be an easy dub. I activate Abyss Dweller because he cannot stop Abyss Dweller with like an impermanence because of the Abyss Dweller being under one of the arrows. He then activates Harpy's Feather Duster to destroy my traps. Of course, I'm going to negate that with Naturia Exterio. And look at that. I sent a Fairy Tale Snow, which is probably going to be his worst nightmare, because Fairy Tale Snow can activate a bunch of times, and every time this card activates, it's basically filling the graveyard, giving Fairy Tale Snow more fodder to summon itself. So I just go ahead and negate that Fairy Tale, or that Feather Duster, activate Rule Colossus, he's going to chain his Agito. I'm going to activate Crime right here. Now the reason I activate Crime on his Agito is because Agito can summon itself onto the field, and then also it can revive back a Kelbeck for him, which if he does that, he can then go into his own Abyss Dweller and turn off my graveyard. I don't want that, so I go ahead and activate Crime to negate. And then I go into Kaleido Heart. And my opponent pretty much scoops it up. I mean, he had no further plays, and my board was super unbreakable. I mean, he had a hand full of cards, but what could he have possibly done, right? So, I know a lot of people always ask me about my deck list. I will show my deck list. And here it is. This is the deck that I played. Now, of course, there's no terraforming here. I'm only running 2 copies of Maxi. I'm only running 2 copies of Exchange of Spirit and not 1. Some people run 1. I got 2 copies of Scream, 2 copies of Sulliek. Now, this card can actually be really good. You could run this card at 3 because if you can just do some mills and you can mill without special summoning or without normal summoning, I should say if you can mill cards without normal summoning and you hit this card, basically it'll give you a tier limit monster. Like, you can just get a monster that you could use to extend with. So hitting this card can be good to get you a starter if you don't have a starter. So yeah, 40 card deck, super consistent, super powerful. I don't have terraforming in this deck. I think Rainbow Bridge of Salvation just works better because I find myself a lot of the times getting the field spell and then drawing terraforming after I got the field spell, and I'm just sitting there looking stupid with a terraforming that can't do anything. I think out of all the games I've played, even when I play terraforming like in this deck, there's a lot of times where I'll hit a Rainbow Bridge of Salvation in the grave and then I'll just activate it because it has more value. Not only do I get the field spell, but I also get the tortoise as well in my hand, which can be used as fusion material. So then on top of that, sometimes when you're milling and you mill terraforming, a Maxi and then like a Herald of Orange Light kinda sucks. I'm not gonna lie, kinda sucks. It's kinda irritating. So taking that out the deck just kinda boosts the consistency of other things. Sometimes I almost want to play without Maxi entirely because as you guys can see, when I played against an opponent and he had Maxi, this deck was still able to beat him. I beat almost everybody I played to activate Maxi against me. Pretty much all of them. Because this deck doesn't care about Maxi at all. Like, you get a lot of value from your summons and not a lot of downside. You're putting up very powerful monsters because all the summoning and all the like fusions and all of that stuff is happening off field in the graveyard. So you're putting up cards that they have to deal with instead of summoning a bunch of weak monsters onto the field and then getting those bosses. So it's happening in the graveyard off field. So you're still getting like a balance for the summons versus the Maxi. Yeah, I mean, super powerful deck. Now, of course, this deck is going to look a lot different once the ban kind of comes into effect. This card will be gone, so basically the deck will look more like, where is it at? Oh, right here. Basically the deck will look a little bit more like this, like this. The deck will have cards more like this. Now, am I worried that this deck won't be good when it's like this? Absolutely not. I'll show you how easy it'll be to just simply fix these issues. There we go. Problem solved right there. Or even you could even put this and take one of these out, right? Problem solved. Now you got 3 of these cards. All of these cards right here, the deck will still be extremely consistent. If I go to draw 5 cards, that's full combo. This is full combo. You could activate Sharon to pitch the Kelbeck, start milling. You got Gravekeeper, Trap, Sulliek. This one here, you can do the same thing. Activate Sharon to pitch something. You could pitch me. I would pitch probably Medora right here. So then that way I have a shuffler in my grave. I guess this would be like a sign of your first brick. More so, because the most you could really do is set a card face down and then pass turn, and then try to start activating effects on your opponent's turn. But even then, you wouldn't really get anything good out of this one. So this one would kind of be a brick. This is a pretty good hand right here, but this is kind of like the last hand where you really won't be able to do much. You can set these cards and then you could play on your opponent's turn, but on your turn you're basing it off of a Merly normal summon and hoping to mill 3 cards and hit a tier limit. So let's see. So yeah, so I would have hit Rhino Heart, which wouldn't have been too bad because it would have special summoned onto the field and then got some effects like that. But yeah, so if you guys enjoyed the video, this was the deck, and yeah, catch y'all on the next one. Peace.